let's end with a couple of things. I went way over the time. I apologize. Just a couple of minutes and we end. A few terms that have to do with these realities that we did not cover right now. Each one of them we could spend an entire lecture or more on. And these are terms that you encounter, especially in the narration. So at least I'm leaving you the very short, quick definition to each in case you encounter them. Okay? The first one is ihtidar. Ihtidar means someone is in the state of dying. The state of dying, what we see as human beings, what we see is completely different from what the person is experiencing. There is a point of view of us seeing someone who is passing away, and then there is what they are experiencing as they're going through this. A part of that is the process of extracting of the soul that we talked about, how it could be really good or really bad for someone. Okay, so if you see ihtidar, it's a reference to the time when someone is in the stage of passing away. This is not a moment, this is a whole stage. Okay, that's one. The second one is naz'ur ruh. Again, naz'ur ruh is the soul is being taken out. This can be a very long process or a very short process. And it could be very difficult or it could be very easy. But it's not an instant. It's not a black and white or a punctual point in time. This is a process. Naz'ur ruh is a process. Okay? So again, just to have very high level definitions. Zuhuq al-ruh is the moment when the soul completely detaches from the body. So now that process is over, and now you are, so the ihtidar and naz'ur al-ruh, you are still in the process of dying. Zuhuq al-ruh, now you are past the point of death. You are now officially dead. You have now entered your own afterlife. Okay? There's nothing else that can happen from that point on. You are entirely and completely hostage to whatever you left in this world in terms of actions and intentions. And then the term adila. Ya'dil. Al-insan ya'dil, or adila, and there's a prayer of adila. This is that someone who had a faith that was shaky, that was not entirely firm in their heart and their soul. So at the moment of death, because of the difficulty of that time, of that stage, there are people who lose their faith entirely. If that happens, we say that this person has gone through, they have adala. He's shifted. He's shifted from believing in God to not believing in God. From believing in Muhammad to not believing in Muhammad. From believing in the Quran to not believing in the Quran. That's the udul. And this is the importance of continuously being in a state of reminder of what do you actually believe in. Is your belief deeply anchored in you? There are human beings who go through certain things in life when you're completely in a state of shock, you may forget your name. That's why when, let's say you're in a car, an accident, even if nothing physically happens to you, if a trauma happens in front of you, one of the first things they check, if there's nothing wrong with you physically, they ask you, do you know where you are? Do you know what day we are? They're asking you very trivial, very simple questions, and there are people who can't answer. They don't understand, or they understand the question, they don't know how to answer because of the trauma that they've just experienced. It seems that the stage of the soul being extracted from the body is no less of a trauma than these events. We want our faith to be strong enough that even if I were to forget my name and what day of the week it is, I'm not going to forget my faith. That's why I repeat every day in my prayer so many times. It's so that I anchor it and I keep thinking about it all the time. 5 times a day in my prayers, and I read the Quran, and I attend places, and I read books. Why? It's so that it's actually part of who I am. It's not something that comes and goes wishy-washy, that I may lose at the closest, the quickest, trauma, shock, anything that comes to, shake my system and my person, my belief, all of that just goes away. Because it was never really fixed and firm in the first place. Right? So this is the whole topic of adila, that simply, as I said, just to have the term, you understand what the term is. Again, for this whole lesson and the next lessons, I think as you guys saw already, there is nothing really, overly complex theoretically in all of this. So a lot of this, the point in everything that we're talking about right now, the point in all of this is not just to accumulate information and all of that. That's really good. Okay, you have your understanding, your theoretical understanding. The point is we go back and we think, what does this mean? Now that I know this, what does this mean? Practically, what does it mean for my life? Okay, so I'm emphasizing more on the theoretical knowledge, making sure that you at least have a proper image of all of this. And this is going to apply to the next few lectures too. But the point in all of this is, what do you do with this? Now that you have this knowledge, how does it translate into action in your life? Does it just stop at, I know what happens when I die, I know what happens when I'm in the grave, I know what happens in the afterlife? Or does it mean anything for the way I live my life? And the last point I wanted to make is, I think anyone, the more you spend time understanding and meditating about this topic of death, the more it has an impact on your life. And this is something that's highlighted very clearly in the Holy Quran, very clearly in the Hadith. If you want to be fully in control, fully disciplined in your life, the easiest, quickest way to do that is to fully realize that you will die. And, we can open a whole series of lectures on how philosophy has dealt with this. A lot of philosophers have made this the central point. There's a big philosopher in recent times, Martin Heidegger. His entire philosophical system is based on the idea that a human being realizes that death is inevitable. So at least as a philosopher, as a deep thinker, he has fully grasped this. But of course, he goes, we believe, in a completely different direction, because he doesn't have the benefit and the guidance of a religious scripture and a religious guidance. So he's relying entirely on what a human mind can do, which we said has limitations. And so in the end, these philosophies are always going to either make you reach a state of depression or a state of nihilism. So basically, nothing is worth anything, life is meaningless, everything's ridiculous, there's no truth or false, you live it however you want, and so on and so forth. Relativity of values and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so anyways, all of that to say, practically in your daily lives, all of us, you have to find a way to remind yourself of death. Do whatever you want to do. Find the trick that you want to do. But at the end of the day, you need something to remind you that there is death waiting. At least in the big decisions in your life. Things that involve rights of others. Things that involve big projects. Things that involve where you're going with your life. You need to keep in mind that there is death awaiting. Either you believe in all of this or you don't. So if you do, then there has to be something that reminds you this is happening, so that you don't wake up too late, as the Holy Quran keeps saying. Then we ask, let's go back so that we fix what we left behind. There's a story, very quickly, let's end with that story. There's a scholar by the name of Agha Buzurg al-Tahrani. Huge scholar. He was a legal scholar and so on and so forth, but he was well known for, as a historian, he specialized in history, in biographies and in bibliographies. The book that he wrote his main work, الذريعة إلى تصانيف الشيعة. It took him 50 years to write it. And if you compare what he did, it would be a monumental task. Today you would have teams of scholars creating that encyclopedia. 28 large volumes written by hand. That's one of his works. He has others. He wrote Tabaqat. The Tabaqat is 18 huge volumes that was recently published in 28 or 30 volumes. That's another work. This one, that's his main work that he took 50 years to write. Dhari'a has over 53,000 entries as an encyclopedia. 53,000 entries, each one of them telling you the full life of a scholar and specializing in each one of their works that he was able to find. What did they write? The treaties that they wrote, the books that they wrote, some of them are found, some of them are lost. That was his main work. In any case, so this is for anyone who's interested in knowledge and this theoretical stuff. This is Agha Buzurg al-Tahrani. He would take a little bit of food that would last him 1 week, and he would go to the library and he would stay there for about a week. He would not go out. He would work for 1 week at a time, come out and go back again. And that's how he wrote that book. They say that he had dug a grave in his house. And every night he would lie in the grave. He would come to the grave and he would lie in it and he would recite the verse that we read. The verse that says, حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَ أَحَدُهُمُ الْمَوْتِ, and when death reaches one of them, قَالَ رَبِّ ارْجِعُونَ لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلُ صَالِحًا فِيمَا تَرَكْتُ. He asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, return me so that I do good in what I have left behind. And then he answers himself as he's lying in the grave. Every day he says, لَقَدْ أَرْجَعْنَاكَ يَا مُحْسِن. His name was Muhsin, Sheikh Muhammad Muhsin, but they call him Agha Buzurg al-Tahrani. So he pretends, he tells himself, imagine if I were actually in the grave tonight and I have died. And I'm now asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, please return me so that I may do more good. I want to do good. Return me. And so he answers himself and he says, okay, we've given you one more day. Go back. And every day he would do this at night. That was his trick. I'm not saying we dig a grave in our houses tonight. Find a way to remind yourself of death on a regular basis, whatever it may be, and do it in a productive way, just like he did. So his point is not that I remember death, therefore I am depressed and I hide in my house and I close the door and I stay depressed for the rest of my life in seclusion. He turned this into something positive and something productive. Imagine that you had reached death and then you are told, the angel of death tells you, and now you know for sure that you are dying, and he tells you, you know what? There was a change. We just granted you another month. We just granted you another year. We just granted you another 10 years. How would you live? What would you do? So turn it into something positive. But remember that it is there. The inevitability of death is there. Turn it into something positive and make sure that you have some sort of constant reminder that death is always there. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد